Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So my talk tonight is Ready, Set, Prod. It's how to use Firebase to create a production-ready React app for under $1. Oh, is it not letting me move slides? All right, one moment. It's not letting me. There we go. All right. So I know Jen just kind of did an introduction. Pretty much all the same. I haven't changed much in the last week. And yeah, I'm currently the CEO of a startup that I founded about 6 months ago. Before that, I was working on a different startup that didn't really end up coming to fruition. So I hope also through this talk that this is just like a good reminder that even if things don't work out, sometimes from the ashes comes something even better. And to kind of hone those skills that I'm trying to learn as a CEO, I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in technology management. So let's go ahead and begin. So with this talk, I just kind of want to emphasize that if you're feeling at all like I did about a year ago, where you think you have an awesome idea, not think, you know you have an awesome idea, and you're looking at the technology and you just see so many different moving pieces: hosting, deployment, testing, front end, back end work. And it just seems like it's so much. I hope at the end of this talk, 15 minutes from now, that you just have a bit of a sigh of relief and you really think to yourself, like, all right, like I can do this, because that is what Firebase has given me as a tool. And I hope that it helps you too. And so what exactly is Firebase? So I think of it as one console to rule them all. It's a little bit of a Lord of the Rings throwback. So it is this really incredible tool that a Google team created, well, that a Google team bought, that basically takes all of the different moving pieces of creating a mobile application or a web app and makes them much easier to handle. So I always think of software architecture kind of like it's building a house. And there are some pieces when you're building a house that you might be like, you know what? I don't really care what the fixture in the bathroom is. I just want a fixture that works. I don't have the time right now. I don't know what the best fixture is. And what Firebase basically does is it takes all of those pieces and puts them together for you. So it gives you all these different puzzle pieces that you can put together to make whatever app you want. Some of the most powerful tools are user authentication, which can always be so tricky because you never want to expose people's data. Offering a really awesome non-relational database that's just native to the platform, easy hosting, a really great serverless backend tool, as well as analytics tools because it's built by Google, really easy Google Analytics integration, as well as really great MailChimp and Stripe integration, as well as environment management. So I'm going to go more into each of these pieces a little bit down the road. So an example of how I ended up using Firebase so extensively. So over the last 6 months, I've been building a company called ChattyKathi. And as I kind of mentioned, this is my second startup. In my first one, I was a major overachiever and I was like, I'm going to build a full Kotlin backend and I'm going to deploy it on Kubernetes and I'm going to do all the SSL certifications myself. And I did all that. And like, it is way too much for one person. So when I started over, I took a step back and I thought to myself, like, all right, you are going to do this yourself with some help from some friends who are co-founders as well. But it's time to put the ego aside. You just need something that works, that's scalable, that's easy to build, and that you can get standing up quickly. And some of my requirements were I wanted phone number verification as well as Google verification. I wanted to really easily be able to support dev, test, and production environments. I wanted to use a non-relational database, have image storage, and most importantly, this is me building it kind of by myself right now, but it would be awesome if a year from now someone gave me a bunch of money and I could have 100 developers. So I wanted something that could scale in both development and users. So that's how I ended up using Firebase. And what's so awesome about it is they have a really generous free tier. So this is a screenshot of how much it cost me to support about 100 users last month. So about 90 cents for the entire application, past some text messaging fees, which one concern I've always had starting a new project is like, sometimes like AWS gets a little tricky and you end up with like a $50 bill and you don't really know why. But this makes it super clear. One of the downfalls of Firebase is once you do get at scale, it does become a little bit more expensive. But what's awesome is all of this is built right on top of the Google Cloud provider. So you can always default back to that, do things a little bit more manually, and save money that way. So going forward in the next like 5 to 10 slides, I'm going to show you all some screenshots of some of the code that I have, as well as some screenshots of the Firebase console. Because I figured if it's all right with the gens, I will. I have a PDF of this presentation and I'm happy to share it. So if you're starting a project and you get stuck, which I did a million times, I hope this is just a place you can go back to kind of help get the ball rolling. So to initialize a Firebase project, and all of my stuff is built off of React and TypeScript, so I'm going to use a lot of examples based off of that here. You basically initialize a configuration file, and that configuration file just has things like your API key, authentication domain, stuff like that. And you get all of that from the console over here. And this is just a screenshot of what you first see when you set up a Firebase project. And you can see on the left-hand side, you kind of get like a taste for all the cool things that you get to do. It's basically just a GUI that makes all of that stuff that you feel as an engineer, like, I should know how to do all of this, but I don't. It makes it way, way easier to handle. The big one is user authentication. So especially because I was starting a company and I'm one person writing most of this code, I was super worried about accidentally exposing people's password and personal information. But Firebase handles all of that for you. So you basically write a little bit of code that looks something like this, and it all gets pumped into the console and it gets exposed to you through really, really readable format. You basically get access to this user ID. You never know the password, which in my mind is really ideal. And anytime a user updates a password or updates sensitive information, they handle those updates too. So at least for me, it was a huge sigh of relief to know that I personally wasn't going to be responsible for this sensitive information. The next is hosting. This is especially a piece that as a software engineer, I feel like I should know how to do way better than I do. But it just always like drives me crazy, all of the little things that you need to make sure fall into place to properly host a good project. But with Firebase, you don't write any code and you actually just configure things in the console and within your DNS settings. And they give you really, really, really incredible step-by-step instructions to make sure that you're setting this up quickly. And you can deploy the same code out to multiple different domains super easily. You can deploy out to subdomains. All of that stuff that ends up being a headache regularly is just super, super easy with Firebase. The next is Firestore. So Firestore is their native non-relational database. And so it is entirely accessed as well through this console and kind of through the GUI. But one of the most incredible pieces of it is, let's say you're getting an MVP up and running and you don't really need a full backend. You also don't have time to write a full backend. You can access, manipulate, query, delete all of your Firestore data just from your front end through the Firestore query language. And so while it may not be ideal for really high loads, it's a pretty incredible tool if you're getting something up and running and you're trying to test out a lot of new features. It makes the development time there so, so, so much faster than needing to set up a full Java, Kotlin, Scala, whatever backend. But if you do want to set up a backend, they have really, really, really awesome serverless backend tools. So I'm not sure how familiar everyone here is with a serverless backend, but you basically just write these little functions that get exposed as endpoints. You can write as many as you want, and it basically creates a backend for you without you really needing to go through a lot of the heavy lifting of creating a typical kind of like REST backend. So this over here, I did create a node backend where my functions are hosted, and they do require that. They do require that these functions are hosted in some kind of backend language. But once you do that, um, straight from the same console, there's just a little functions tab. All of your endpoints get displayed in one place. And you can monitor the health as well as check out the logs and see the usage of how often everything's getting hit. And this is one of those things where it seems like, obviously, yes, of course, obviously where your code is, also that's where your logs should exist. Also, you should be able to easily see when things go down. But as I'm sure we've all worked in some bigger projects and at some different companies, that is like not always the case. So it's really, really awesome to have this tool just easily accessible. The next, and this is such a huge thing, especially if you are starting a company or you have a new idea, and like any company probably needs some kind of email integration. To integrate with MailChimp with your Firebase project, you click a button. You do not write any code. If you can write some code, but if you're trying to push new users into an email list, you click a button. If you are trying to pump some data from your database into BigQuery so that you'll be able to support analytics either now or down the line, you press a button. Which this is again one of those things that it's like, why don't we do this more often? It's not that we can't, as engineers or people interested in technology, it's not that we can't like write native code to hook into a MailChimp API. It's just kind of like, why, you know? It's such a standard process. And so they've really helped to ease a lot of those standard processes, which I really love. And the last one is different coding environments. So this is something that did take me a little while to figure out. So I just kind of wanted to highlight it, especially for this startup where I have some code that I want to make sure is getting tested by me and my other co-founders, not ready for prime time, not ready to be pushed out to everyone. I wanted to make sure I could easily support a development environment, a testing environment, and a production environment. And to do that, super easy. You basically add cross environment support, use whatever dependencies you most like. I use CrossN and Krakow. And then you just set up a few different projects. So I have ChattyKathi and ChattyKathi Dev. So that's my development environment and my production environment. And that's kind of all you do. I mean, not all you do. You do have to provide some different environment and variables and all of that. But it is super easy to make sure that your environment is secure and that there's no cross-contamination or anything along those lines. And so, yeah, the big takeaway with Firebase is that the code that you will write with it is clean, concise, and most importantly, secure. I mean, like, I cannot emphasize enough, one of the most terrifying things of starting my own company. I've worked at companies that handled millions and millions of users, but making sure that you're building something that keeps people's data secure is super scary. And with Firebase, I feel like a lot of that is just off my back, which is awesome. And everything you're able to access through the console is readable and user-friendly. So if you have some non-technical co-founders or you're working with non-technical people, you can share the console with them and they can see and access the data. They can play around with different things, even if they don't know how to write code, which I think is incredible. I mean, there shouldn't be this barrier between people who write code and people who don't in the technology field. We all care about the products and we should all be able to be a big part of them. And so just thought I'd end with a little quote. It is by an old white dude, but he's like super old. It's from the 1500s. But I still found it to be super relevant. So do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand and work with whatever tools you may have at your command. And it's crazy that something written 500 years ago, I feel like is how I feel as well about software development. I cannot tell you how long I just kept waiting until I felt like it was the right time to start my company or the right time to execute on this idea. When it came down to it, I just needed to put my head down and I needed to put in a few hours of work whenever I could. And it's amazing what can blossom from that. So that is my talk. This is just some of my information, as well as when I do share this presentation, if it's all right, I provided some resources, just some really good different articles that I used when I was getting all of this set up, because sometimes it just feels like you're Googling into oblivion. So these were super helpful. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, let me know.
Yeah, we had a few questions in the chat.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
Cool. Yes. Marie Ilana. Wait, that I do not feel like I know I heard your name. I don't feel like I said it right that time though. Marie Elena, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as someone who's just learning how to code, I would totally use this, especially to get an initial project up and running. I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be confusing and you're gonna beat your head against the wall and you might cry, but I was once told during a talk that if you don't learn a new software language every year that makes you cry, you're not learning enough. So I would definitely dig into it and yeah, just play around and see what happens. Backend endpoints equals API equals ways for other code to get stuff directly from your code. Yes, and so one thing that Firebase does offer is they have a lot of native authentication tools. So that serverless backend, if you wanted to set one up, you could just set up a traditional like API REST backend as well. But if you set one of those up, they have a lot of authentication keys that you can use, as well as some native stuff to make sure that people are not just hitting that endpoint and getting whatever data they want from you, which is pretty awesome. Cool.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, first, that was an awesome presentation. So thanks for the great overview.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, considering you did your last project without all of the benefits of Firebase, and then on this one, you know, you kind of like dove in, what would you say are some of the drawbacks or like things that you felt like you couldn't customize enough to how you wanted them to work?
Yeah, I think the most frustrating one is while it is awesome that there is Firestore and that there's this like native non-relational database you can use, the actual querying range really sucks. um, there's I had mostly worked with relational like SQL databases, and even like the non-relational ones were still pretty extensive in what you can query. This one's super limited in its querying ability, so you have to be really careful about how you structure your data, or you're gonna end up kind of not being able to query for what you want. So I've been looking for ways around that, and if anyone knows of anything, please let me know.
Do you think some of it was just like the nature of a like NoSQL database?
Yeah, I think that they did create something that it's super fast in how it queries. And you know, I of course like think that's way preferable than being able to just like throw data in willy-nilly. I don't know. I think just like I'm really I kind of like learned a lot about non-relational databases during this project and think I just have a lot more to learn.
But yeah, that's good insight. That was your biggest kind of getting annoyed, frustrated.
Yeah, it's something I didn't realize at first. So I actually did, when the application was in like V1 beta, need to kind of reconfigure a few things. So I was happy that there were not that many people on it yet.
Yeah, did you have to migrate a lot of data?
Not my, it was mostly just like 20 family and friends. So I kind of just deleted it and told them to start over. But in the future, we'll not do that. It was just the time to you know, write those scripts to do it. It was just like I'll just tell them to delete it.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah. And Spencer, you asked if my React code is on GitHub. It's not, just because it's like proprietary at this point for the company, so it's all kind of private. But There are a lot of really awesome, if you just like Google like React Firebase examples, that's how I got started, is I definitely pulled one of those down and just kind of used it as a starting point. Yeah.
No microphone. I was gonna say I have a question if that's okay.
Yeah.
So one thing that I noticed with Firebase and like even your graph that you had, we were like, oh, I mean, you have 100 people, but you're only paying like less than $1. But from what I've seen as the tiers go up, the prices do tend to just whoosh up in a really steep incline. Is that part of your plan as you started out with it, knowing that you want your company to grow, but this is a really great like a fertilizer to get it started? Is there a transition plan in place as well?
The way that I kind of thought about it is their tools are so easy to use. It's probably cut my development time in half. So even though I do project that if I am lucky enough to get a bunch of users on this application, the costs will go up. In my mind, it means I probably won't have to hire another software engineer because so much of it is like just easily configured. So that's the way I've kind of been thinking about it, but we can talk again in like 6 months and see how I feel then.
Makes sense. And by the way, I really appreciate your insights from actually understanding how servers are made and making them from scratch compared to just using Firebase. I'd gone into using Firebase from the front end where I'm like, I don't know anything about servers, but I need one. Let's just boop. So for me, it was magic. But I guess when you're used to making it yourself, you're like, it doesn't do everything that I want.
Yeah, but it is awesome. And yeah, because I before this worked mostly I like full stack, but a lot of back end experience. And that was why with that first startup, I kind of like I was like, I can build a back end, like it'll, I can do that. And yeah, just like it's not that it shouldn't be done. It's just at this stage in the game, when you kind of have an MVP, a beta going, like, do you really need it? Like so much is going to change between your like for your product between now and 6 months from now. If you're going to have to rebuild it anyways, just like build something fast and cheap now. And then if you need to rebuild it later, I think.
You're really smart. Thank you.
But yeah, okay. And then Dim asked, new to Firebase, got a question. Do you know how it is integrated with other tools and technologies? It is integrated so well. That's one of my favorite parts about it. So it's actually, so I used it to build and this actually answers Leanne's question as well. I'm not building it using React Native. I'm just using React.js with TypeScript and building a progressive web app. But Firebase was initially built to support both Android and Apple, like Swift development mostly. And so they make it super, super, super easy to deploy these projects out. They make it super, super easy to integrate with other companies and other technologies. I think it's way, way easier than trying to do it yourself, just because the times that I have done it myself, you just like always get stuck on like, I forgot a single character here, or like I forgot a colon here, or like why I'm using a different version than the example that I'm looking at, and what's the thing missing that gets it going. And it really takes a lot of that uncertainty away, at least initially, at least when you're just trying to get something going.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any technologies in particular that you're curious about?
I heard recently more about the Firebase and Flutter going very well together. So I was just wondering, how it's going with the other technologies.
Yeah. Yeah, they have a whole list of extensions, and it probably has like thousands in it. And those are kind of like what I mentioned. If you have a new like technology you want to work with, you kind of click a button. Like if you want to get Mailchimp integrated, you click a button. There's like thousands of those. So hopefully, whatever technologies you're thinking about, they at least support, or someone's tried it before and can help you kind of get going.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so,
Cool.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, I was just gonna thank everybody for the great questions.
Yeah, they are very, very awesome questions. I think the last thing I was just going to say is like, I do not want to come off as like, I have all of this figured out and I am like a Firebase master and I don't spend most of my time on Medium or Googling. That is 100% how I learned all of this. And I really, really hope if you all have projects that you're considering, that you get started, but know that you're going to get stuck and that's totally okay. And that there's a bunch of resources out there, and just don't be scared to utilize Stack Overflow, or you can reach out to me too. Yeah, that's the best part about our field, right? Is it's always like changing. There's always new things and there's always something new to learn. And then Leanne, yeah, I am working on this as my full-time job. I quit my consulting job about a year ago. This is something that I've kind of always wanted to do. Long story short, my husband's also a software engineer, but I went through coding school before him and was actually able to pay for his coding school. So now that we're in a financially like stable situation, I get to try this out and get to kind of try out building a company. So I'm like super grateful to have the opportunity and just see where it goes.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.